Yeah, so welcome everybody who's here. I think everyone knows everyone, but it's Chris Hebert. I'm down at TSCC, paddler there. I am not a cold water paddler. And I was talking with Jeff at one of our paddling committee meetings, saying like, you know, what kind of gear do you like, and how would I get into it, and what would I need, and what's the sort of base level of gear, what's the advanced stuff, and so we started talking about it, and then I was like, I wonder if other people would want to know about this. So I thought we could pull a couple of experienced paddlers together that have years of cold water paddling. So for the first half, we'll just kind of cover. We're going to get into the dangers of cold water. Risk assessment, risk mitigation, and that kind of thing, and we'll cover some theory, and then we'll jump into the clothing and preparing on the second half. So with that out of the way, Matt and Jeff, maybe you just kind of tee up a little bit on your experience with cold water paddling.
So I've been paddling cold water. This is probably my 4th or 5th year. I think it's my 5th year now. So I mostly do outrigger and stand-up paddleboard. I try to do outrigger as long as I can, and then usually like sometime in January, I switch over and just do sup. Mainly because where I have to launch from usually means I have to walk it in, and I just take the board, and it's a lot easier. So yeah, I start off kind of with no one else paddling around with me down near TSCC. So this past year, it's been nice to have a lot more people coming out in the cold water and wearing the right gear. But unfortunately, there are some that aren't wearing the right gear. So I thought this would be a good chance to kind of give people some tips and pointers on what to wear and what not to wear.
So yeah, Matt, you guys, I know most of y'all. I'm not sure how long I've been paddling cold water. I got my Drysuit probably about 7 years ago, and I've been in and out in the winter since then. I started out in sea kayaking, and then I will generally surf ski a bit almost every month of the year. I try to get in once every month of the year, and in the last 2 winters, I've been doing a fair bit of whitewater in the winter. So because we have a flood season in the winter and the spring. So that's really a cold water activity in Southern Ontario. And I surf all winter. I've been doing that about 4 years, 3 or 4 winters. And so I'm in the winter water. We sometimes call it slurfing because it's slushy. So yeah, that's my thing. Okay. So yeah, here's our just little agenda. Just as Chris said, we're going to talk about risk management in cold water, and then dressing is kind of the main bulk of the time. I'll just start off a little bit with stuff that a lot of you already know probably, but is probably worth just reviewing real quick. First thing, this is like before you start, you should have an idea of why you're going out and what you can, what kinds of risks you can tolerate. So, and I have this at the end here, but at the National Outdoor Leadership School in the States, they drill into you that the phrase "safety first" is often a route to self-deception, because you are prioritizing doing this thing. So intrinsically, you're going to take some kind of risk. So rather than fool yourself into believing you've covered all your bases and there's no way you can get hurt, remember that you're doing something risky and then taking whatever steps you can to make it less risky. So ask yourself, when you go out, why am I doing this? What do I want to get out of it? What risk can I not avoid, like or what risks are intrinsic to the activity? And also, to what extent can I mitigate those risks and not make them worse? And finally, before I go out, I ask myself, okay, am I okay with this level of risk? And not just for myself, but do I feel okay about this level of risk for the other people that I'm going out with? So ask yourself these questions in a serious way every time you go out. This is a picture I put in. I thought we could take a look at this dude hanging out in the water, I believe in late October of 2019, and ask, what do we think about what he's wearing, and whether or not it's an appropriate kind of response to the risk of the activity. We can talk about that at the end. All right, so when we talk about the cold in paddling, there are sort of three concepts that are interrelated but not exactly the same, and it's important to distinguish between them and to recognize them. Cold challenge, hypothermia, and finally cold shock, which is the thing that we're most concerned about. And we have here some pictures. That's the Iceman, Wim Hof. Maybe you guys have heard of him. That rapids there is the Upper Credit River, not that really that far from here, a little rapid called Pinball, where I've done a fair amount of swimming in January. And this is the Humber River right here, just a couple of weeks ago, starting to ice over. So just talking about cold challenge, this is a general term. So anything you do in even moderately cool weather can constitute a cold challenge to the body, right? So any short or long-term exposure to temperatures below the temperature of your skin is gonna is gonna require from your body some kind of a response, and that response will be more or less successful depending on a lot of things. It'll depend on the outside temperature, but it'll also depend on how much you're eating, how much you're drinking, what you're wearing, how fit you are, and if you have any underlying conditions that may affect things. I mean, Raynaud's phenomenon, for instance. In general, with cold, the more tired you are, the hungrier you are, the thirstier you are, the less well-dressed you are, the harder it's going to be for your body to overcome the challenge, right? And as the challenge becomes more severe, or as our capacity to meet the challenge is more and more diminished, we progress from a healthy cold response to mild hypothermia, and then moderate hypothermia, and then severe hypothermia, and eventually we die. So, so cold is a genuinely serious threat, not just in paddling, but in any cold weather activity. So again, thinking generally, and in the medium or long term, for the most part, the threat that in most activities we're concerned with is hypothermia. And we have here a little diagram from Wilderness Medicine Association in the States, showing some of the symptoms of the progression as we move from a healthy response, which involves moderate shivering, an increased metabolism and increased heart rate too, and some minor discomfort, maybe especially in your outer extremities. And then as our response gets less and less adequate, the shivering first becomes uncontrollable. And I bet there are people here, you could raise your hands in chat or something, who have had that experience of not being able to control your shivering. Maybe it's paddling, or maybe it's some other activity. Often that mild hypothermic response comes at the very tail end of of some active thing that you're doing, maybe like on the dock after you've hoolied, something like that. So shivering becomes uncontrollable and your judgment is impaired. And I certainly have experienced that many times. The inability to make good judgments. You guys may, who know me, may think, well, Matt actually has that problem all the time, but it gets worse when you begin to show signs of hypothermia. And then, mild hypothermia, it sucks and it's dangerous, but the more severe forms of hypothermia are really a problem, and they can very quickly lead to life-threatening situations. So what happens next is that you stop shivering and your pulse and breathing drop, and then your ability to respond to stimuli diminishes. In wilderness medicine, they call it the AVPU scale. You go from being alert to being able to respond just a little bit to verbal stimuli, to being able to respond to only to physical stimuli, like to being pinched or kicked or something. And finally, you become completely unresponsive. And then at the end, in severe hypothermia, the heart itself cools. It becomes electrically unstable. It's very dangerous to move someone who's in that condition, and eventually it leads to not defib, to cardiac arrest or failure. So that's hypothermia. It's it can come on very fast, and it can also come on much slower. It's there's chronic hypothermic response, which can arise over the course of a week if you're in the mountains, say, or if you're paddling in cold water. you know, on some kind of a trip, which we're unlikely to do here. And then I wanted to add just a little quick thing to say that our feet and especially our hands are really vulnerable to cold response. And while hypothermia is, we usually talk about hypothermia as the life-threatening danger, in paddling, we have a special relationship to our hands because we need to have some dexterity in order to hold the paddle. And and even before mild hypothermia, you can have a loss of strength and sensation and mobility in your hands, and then you can't grip your paddle, and then you can't get to shore, and then you're really in trouble. So we have to layer on to our concern about hypothermia, an extra concern about keeping our extremities functional. So all of those are very important concerns, especially if you're out for a long time. And they are concerns that, to one degree or another, we share with most other outdoor activities in the winter. Paddlers, and to some extent surfers and some other people who do stuff, ice fishermen, have an extra concern, which is the very acute short-term response of the body to immersion in cold water, which is known as cold water shock. Maybe people can note in chat if you have had some experience with this. So what happens when you fall into the water is that there's a kind of healthy response of the body to shut down blood flow to the whole epidermis, like to the outer layers of the body. And that rapid shutting down increases the blood pressure and puts a significant additional strain on the heart. So people with any kind of cardiac condition or history of cardiac arrest or other cardiac conditions may want to think 3 times about undertaking an activity in which they might be immersed in cold water rapidly. So there's this cardiac issue. And then the other thing is that when you fall in cold water, your diaphragm for a short period stops working properly. And this can take different forms in different people or on different occasions. Sometimes it leads to an inability to inhale. And I've experienced that myself a number of times swimming in cold water. And it's often reported that people will have the opposite problem, a very intense and uncontrollable inhalation reflex. And what happens is you fall in the water, you're underwater, and you inhale rapidly, you get water in your lungs, and suddenly you're in a very dangerous situation. So while hypothermia in general requires some kind of, like finite length of exposure to cold water shock happens immediately, and the dangers are very, very severe. So this immersion in cold water, and we're talking here any water under, officially they say 15 degrees. In my experience, really after 10 degrees, it looks very different. It's immediately life-threatening if you're not wearing thermal protection and not wearing a life jacket. So this is a special danger that is unique to us and to other people. And other things can happen too. Cramps and asthma are often more severe in cold weather. And I just wanted to make a special mention about the additional danger of floating ice, which in warm weather we don't normally have, but which I've always really hated as a paddler. Floating ice can, if for you guys in the OCs with the carbon hulls, they can damage your boat pretty readily. In moving water, like in whitewater, you can run into an ice jam, and then that's like a hazard, like a strainer that can trap you and cause you to drown. And when I'm paddling even flat water through ice as a kayaker, I find that like my paddle bouncing off the ice is very disconcerting, and it's very easy to lose confidence and competence as a paddler. So I just want to, people should be aware of that when they're paddling. So,
And Matt, one point that you made the other night that I thought was a really good one is that ice and cold water and the cold weather increases the risk of otherwise normal activities.
That's right. That's right. So each of these things is kind of raising up the risk level for what otherwise would be relatively straightforward for you. So for instance, we all make our own decisions. Maybe we'll say a moment here in risk mitigation. I paddle alone in the summer on the lake. I feel very comfortable doing that unless the weather is really nuts. And I don't paddle alone in the winter. So paddle with a buddy. I try to, in general, be kind of careful to know what the weather conditions are, no matter when I'm paddling. But in the winter, I really mean it. So if I'm doing whitewater, for instance, I will walk the whole length of the river if I can to check for especially ice hazards, but also other hazards. Yeah, I don't go in a boat where I can't get back in the boat in general, or where I think there's a significant likelihood of tipping. I won't paddle my tippy sprint boat in the winter, and I don't go out. I don't go out far offshore. And always in the winter, we try to dress. We take our dressing seriously as a mode of preparation. So like in whitewater, in the summer, we think there are 5 things. I need my boat, my paddle, my PFD, my helmet, and my spray skirt. And in the winter, I think there are 7 things. I need my boat, my paddle, my helmet, my PFD, my spray skirt, and my dry suit, and my pogies. So that's like part of your essential safety gear, and without which you can't go paddling. Like it's like if you forgot your paddle, you won't go paddling. Was there something else I needed to say, Jeff or Chris or anybody?
No, I think that's it. I think we also, the one thing we want to say is don't dress for the air temperature, dress for the water temperature.
Yeah, the shorthand for that in sea kayaking world is dress for immersion. And this is really important, Jeff. We talked about this the other night. The water temperature and the air temperature vary, more or less independently from one another. The coldest water is to be experienced in the early spring, not in the middle of winter, for the most part. Not always, not everywhere, but very often because of the ice melt that's coming down. So, I'm gonna just flip back to this picture of me. You'll notice here, I'm kind of barely dressed for the cold, right? I'm wearing a thin Farmer John with a 1 millimeter neoprene shirt. It's warmer than a swimsuit, but it's not dressing for the cold. But this is one, there are a bunch of things to think about, but one is that this is in the fall. And in the fall, the air has started to cool off pretty significantly, but the water is still relatively warm until November. But we can easily be fooled in the springtime by temperatures of 15 or 20 or even sometimes 25 degrees in the air temperatures into thinking we're safe to go out in, a shorts and a t-shirt or dressing like Alan Tang. But the dangers of immersion are still just as severe as they are in January.
Yeah, I think spring is the most dangerous time because people it starts to get warm. You could have 20-degree day, and all of a sudden you're like, "Wow, it's beautiful outside," and you go paddling, and meanwhile it's freezing cold water.
And it really sucks to be in your dry suit in April when it's 20 degrees out. It's no fun. It's really hot. And you're sweating like a pig. So the temptations are very great to cut corners on those safety measures.
Conversely, I had to rescue a girl on a sup at one of the TIOCs, and the water wasn't too bad, but the air temperature was pretty cold, and she was shivering uncontrollably in the boat. So I wrapped her up as much as I could and took her back to shore. But it's really important to be dressed for either the cold or the water, whichever one is the coldest.
Yeah, something I wanted to say when we're talking about risk assessment is that you really want to think about what danger you pose to the rest of the group or to society at large when you're undertaking some intrinsically risky activity. And I like to ask people to think about the person who's going to find your body, whether that's the person you're paddling with or some stranger who comes across you in the park or by the shoreline, and just note that when you die, you have an effect on that person. So, you know, we tend, and when we engage in risky behaviors, we tend to think only about the effects on ourselves. But even if you live alone and hate your parents, there's still going to be an effect on someone.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little less morbid than Matt with with my way of saying that. No matter what, like if you go paddling and you're not dressed appropriately and you're with others, you're now their responsibility. You're not your own responsibility. You're theirs, because if something goes wrong and you hoolie, even if you've got like this tank of a boat and you think you'll never hoolie, it can happen. And when it does, all of a sudden everyone else around is responsible to try to help you, and that takes away from them being their safety as well. So it's really, really, really important to look at the risk and weigh them and know how to dress properly and to avoid some of the risks in the cold water.
And that example that Chris just gave is a great one, where Chris is a safety boat. This paddler becomes, incapable of paddling, and as a result takes the safety boat out of the equation. And so the next person who runs into trouble no longer has that safety boat as a backup. So.
And so before we go on, Young, you'd asked about an app that does the water temperatures. And Terrace had sent a website. Is that for the buoys that are in the water though? Because if it is, they take those out of the water eventually.
Those are out right now. They're all out right now. I didn't see that, but if it's the NOAA site.
Yes, the NOAA one. Yeah.
Yeah, the buoys are all out of the water now. They come out usually in October.
I guess it's just more of a general question, because I feel like it applies all year round. Like those days where you're like overdressed or underdressed because you're going by the weather temperature you see, and then it's either way too cold or way too hot. So I was just curious how you guys kind of gauge that, because I'm probably like Alan Tang, hence why I don't do winter cold paddling, because I'll get it wrong. But I'm wondering if there's a way to actually know, especially for people who are driving from so they know what gear to bring and what they should be dressed in all year round. Like if there was what you guys use to do to figure that out.
In the spring, you can use the buoys, and they're pretty decent. They can often be off by 2 to 4 degrees because there are currents in the lake, and the nearest buoy is in Ajax.
I mean, if the buoys are out, you can assume it's too cold, right? Or like it is cold if the buoys are out.
Yeah.
If the buoys are out, it's cold. That's right.
Yeah.
Once the buoy comes out, they come out
because it's cold.
Yeah.
Danger. So, I mean, this time of year, the water is going to be very dangerous for someone who's not properly dressed. I mean, I should also say though, I mean, we can get to this now. If you dress right, you can be pretty safe. I surf all winter long, and I'm in the water. I was in the water on Sunday for 2 hours at Asperger's Bay, at Bluffers Park, and I wasn't even chilly. It was snowing on my face, and it's not a problem. So, should we talk about this stuff now?
Yeah, that's a good segue to the dressing, right?
I mean, I should stop sharing, but just say here on the slide, there are a bunch of components to dressing for the cold. If you're out between November and certainly into March, but probably also into the end of April, you should wear a dry suit. It's really expensive and it sucks to have to buy one. but it opens up this extra season for you. And a dry suit keeps you dry. It doesn't keep you warm. If it's cold out, if the air is cold, then you're also going to add insulating layers. And that could be anything from a pair of long johns to, I've gone out in a dry suit wearing like a jacket, like a parka and other stuff. So there's the dry suit insulating layers. And then we take special consideration of our hands and feet. So we treat them somewhat differently from the rest of our body and our heads also. And your PFD is a piece of your cold protection in addition to everything else. So like dragon boaters, especially, and OC people also, you guys tend to, sometimes you'll go out, you'll just bring your PFD with you in the boat, or you'll often, I know a lot of you guys wear those inflatable PFDs. I would not count that as protection. I think when you're paddling in the winter, you should be wearing a PFD. I always wear a whitewater rescue PFD. I forgot to bring that up.
Let's go through these one by one, Matt. There's a lot to go talk about with each one.
Yeah, why don't I stop sharing and maybe you can take over and show some gear.
Sure.
I'm gonna go down and grab my PFD.
No, great. The one thing Matt doesn't have on there is wetsuits. Wetsuits are fine up until a certain point when it gets really, really, really cold out. There's good things about wetsuits and bad things about wetsuits. One of the good things, if you go into the water, the wetsuit will actually retain some of that water in the wetsuit and actually warms up against your skin and actually provides warmth to you. So if it's like a really nasty day and you're gonna know that you're probably gonna fall in a couple times, a wetsuit can actually be beneficial because you'll keep recycling the water and get warm water in every once in a while, and then you get a fresh layer next time you fall in. So wetsuits can actually work very well. There's like a 4.3 or a 5.4. What those numbers mean is the first number is the core neoprene thickness. So a 5.4 would be a 5 millimeter for your core, and the 4 would be the 4 millimeter on your arms and on your legs. So nothing wrong with wearing wetsuits up to a certain point. Where you have trouble with wetsuits is like getting into January and February, where with a wetsuit, you can't wear anything underneath it. And so you can't have those additional layers that you can with the dry suit. So that's one of the drawbacks of having that wetsuit is you really need to figure out a way to insulate yourself, which means like you have to get into the water to help warm you up. And once it's too cold, it doesn't help.
Jeff, wouldn't you say that one of the drawbacks to a wetsuit is that it's like kind of inflexible or kind of bulky for paddling?
I haven't actually paddled with one, but I do know people that do, and they seem to be okay with them. There's the argument some people make the dry suits are the ones that are the more bulky. So it's all really personal preference, and it really is important to try them on and figure out what goes well for your body and your paddling style and everything else.
I think there are special wetsuits that are designed for paddling. They have a little extra movement in the shoulders. Yeah. This is my 5 mil that I wear surfing. It sucks to paddle in this thing. I don't think it's a matter of opinion. It's no fun, dry suits are kind of annoying to swim with because they got all this kind of bubbles in it and stuff. So it's not so good for surfing, but I think they're clearly preferred.
Yeah, the good thing about dry suit is no matter how cold it is, you can layer up underneath to match the cold. And also because it essentially seals you in, once you actually start your workout, you actually warm up very quickly and you stay warm. And so it actually, and as long as you're wearing the right layers, it helps a lot. So the one thing you never want to wear under a dry suit is cotton. Like the cotton, it gets wet and it stays wet and it sticks to your body and it gets cold.
Cotton kills. Now you should never wear cotton outside. Basically, you shouldn't. Not if you're doing something.
So what you should be wearing is technical gear or merino wool. As an example, my absolute favorite layering top is a merino wool top. Really, really thin, long sleeves, but it's from Icebreaker. Icebreaker stuff is awesome. It's friggin' expensive. But they do have like clearance sales every once in a while, so you can get it like 40% off. But the merino wool, usually I'll layer that underneath and then have like another technical top on top. And then same with the bottoms. I'll do like tights, like Uniqlo makes heat tech tights, and then I'll put the dry suit on over top of that. So let's actually talk about the different types of dry suits though. Matt, do you want me to just kind of show what I have?
Yeah, I'll show yours. Ours are slightly different.
All right. So two types of dry suits, a full dry suit and a semi-dry suit. I don't have a full dry suit. Both the ones I have here are semi-dry suits. And what the difference is with the dry suits, on the arms, they use like a rubber gasket. So it's actually got like a rubber gasket that seals around your wrists. And depending on what type of feet you have, it seals around your feet as well. A full dry suit will also have this gasket around your neck. Say hi to my daughter, Ruby. Full dry suit has the rubberized gasket around your neck, and a lot of people don't like that because it just gets a little too tight and can be a little uncomfortable. And also it retains all of the heat inside. So the ones I have are both
wet. You get wet.
Yeah. So with mine, so this one here is from level 6. So I've had it since I started doing cold water paddling. It's got gaskets on the wrists and also on the ankles. So no feet in this one, and we'll get to boots later. But in the neck, it's just a neoprene neck with a Velcro strap. So if I'm sitting there and I'm taking a bit of a break, I can zip down and actually can let the dry suit breathe a bit because I can get a little hot. So this dry suit here, a little different, doesn't have the zipper, but it is still a neoprene. So it's not as tight as the gasket will be. Good thing with this one, has a couple extra openings for just in case you need to go like get off the boat and do something. Those pee breaks sometimes are the dry suits with the Velcro and the zippers. Sometimes it helps. So the one thing with this one has the booties. So it's got the full feet. So your feet stay inside the dry suit and stay dry. It's great for keeping your feet dry. The only problem is usually you have to have a sock underneath to keep your feet warm. And once you put the sock plus this and then put that in your booty, it can bunch up a little bit. So you have to like maneuver your foot around a little bit in your boot to try to get comfortable sometimes. So those are my two kind of dry suits. Definitely for me, the level 6 dry suit I love. It's been one that's kind of I've had for a long time, and it seems to be really good for paddling. A couple of the other good ones, Sup Skin makes a good one that's very expensive. Level 6 has a couple other ones that are the higher up brand, and there's also a brand called Ocean Rodeo that's actually pretty good as well. Matt, did you want to add
this is Kokatat. Kokatat's kind of like a little bit of an industry standard. I was really lucky to get mine dirt cheap. They're ridiculously expensive. Similar features. I have a slight difference of opinion. I mean, I think it is totally fine to use a semi-dry suit in most of the conditions that you're gonna end up going out on in the winter here. So like you're gonna be paddling in pretty calm water on the lake. I would never use a semi-dry suit whitewater. I think it'd be actually kind of dangerous and would strongly, so for me, it's essential to have a full dry suit with a neck gasket. And Jeff is right, the neck gasket kind of sucks. And I know when my neck gasket is new, I just replaced this a year or so ago. I get a little lightheaded. I see stars when I put it on. There is some restriction of the blood flow to your brain, which, you know,
So,
I don't
Matt,
use mine that much anyway, so it's not that big a deal.
Matt, is the reason for whitewater because you're probably going to get wet? You're probably going to get immersed.
You're underwater all the time.
Yeah.
You know, you're rolling over upside down, and then the water has a fair amount of force, right? So they're like just the normal closure, kind of neck closure on a semi-dry suit. Well, it'll let a little water seep in, but it won't get a bunch. But with when you have like powerful waves, it's going to pump into your wetsuit, your dry suit.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's true. Like I've actually fallen off my board. The board was icy, and we had taken a break, and I had unzipped to cool off, and I fell in while we started paddling, and I'd forgotten to zip back up. Fell in, and water did actually come in, but it wasn't enough because it was only that one instant. So it wasn't enough to like make. It wasn't really that bad, and actually helped because it actually helped cool me down a little bit at the same time.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Yeah, don't do that.
If water does get in, can you assuming it's not that much, it's going to warm up, using your body heat. But then can you get the water out, or you just leave it in there until you're?
You can
Get it out.
It depends.
I mean, you could do a handstand. If you have a lot of water in, whitewater guys travel with a knife. And that's mostly for rope if you get cotton rope or something. But if you're in a lot of trouble, you can cut the foot on your dry suit to just let the water drain out.
Yeah. Or it sounds like Jeff's other suit didn't have feet, didn't have booties. So he could probably lift the
just pull the gasket and it would come out.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say though, so I have a P zipper too, just like Jeff was showing. I never use it, but in January last year, actually, it was so fucking scary, pardon me, that I had to go pee. And I left it like this, kind of with a little bit open. It was big water for me, 10-foot standing waves. And I took a long swim, and that little opening, both my legs filled up with water, like up above the knee, and it was hard to swim, and it was very cold. So those zippers, you got to learn to check them. I should know, and I screwed up. So that's and a buddy check's not a bad idea on zippers and stuff too. But maybe we're getting a little distracted. What? So dry suits. Anybody have questions about either insulation or dry suits?
So if you fall in with the Velcro closure at the neck, how much water will get in?
Oh, well,
none will get in if you've got it closed. It seals up and the neoprene will soak up a little bit of that water, but it won't actually get in.
I have a question. How important is it to keep your head insulated?
Keep your head insulated? Is that what you said, Melvin?
That's correct. How important is it for that?
Actually, I don't wear like a neoprene hoodie or anything like that. All I wear is just like a mech running hat. It's just a technical beanie to basically keep my head warm and my ears warm. If you go in the water, it's tight enough that it'll stay on. But generally, if you're going to be going in the water a lot, then yeah, I would think about buying a neoprene hoodie or beanie.
But remember that Jeff has built-in fur.
Yeah, I've got it already.
I see that.
I was gonna say, Jeff and I do not have the same.
How do I get that?
It's like a merino head.
Yeah, so it's really it's almost however you would keep your head warm if you're going outside for a jog in the winter. It's the same kind of thing for me, at least, and my type of paddling style. Matt, I don't know if it's different for you though.
It's very similar. It's just I'm generally a little wetter because I'm sweating harder because I'm wearing all these layers. And so when I turn around back into the wind, my head is usually cold, and I can't usually quite fix that. I'm going to be too hot going downwind and too cold going upwind. But people with hair may be in a better situation, I think. At least a slightly better situation.
Melissa has a question. What time of year do you switch from dry suit to wetsuit in the spring and then go to no suit at all? January, do you go dry suit?
So I never wear dry suit. I always just stay in, or sorry, I never wear wetsuit, always dry suit. Matt, I don't know about you.
Okay, yeah. I wear neoprene until I feel like I need to go to a dry suit. And let me just say one thing about cold shock. I don't have any underlying cardiac conditions, and I have a fair bit of experience with cold shock. Like I've experienced it a bunch of times, and it is possible to acclimate significantly to cold shock. So, I now no longer am concerned at water temperatures of +1 Celsius that I will inhale cold water or have a panic response. But that's not going to be true for you. If this is your first time, if you never spent time in really cold water, you really need to be worried about it. So what that means is, for me in November, I dress primarily thinking about hypothermia if I fall in the water and not thinking about cold shock. And so, and I think about like, can I make it back from the furthest point if I'm soaking wet? So like, how far am I going and how far away from shore am I? How long am I going to be out? So when we did downwind in November, I wore a dry suit. And otherwise, like paddling on the river sprint, I wore insulating layers. So neoprene and other insulation. And I just switched to a dry suit maybe in the very end of November. What are we, December 20? So at the end of November. But then you're asking what time do you switch in the spring? You got to watch, then you do have the buoys and you can watch the water temperatures and adjust a little bit to the appropriate risk level. Like I'll switch to neoprene probably end of April. I have a lot of neoprene. I have more neoprene than, like, I have a Farmer John and a 2.3 and a 3.4 and a 5.4. So it's just a little. I have a little more flexibility in that regard than most people do.
Again, some people might stick with dry suit the whole time. There's no neoprene involved at all.
Yeah, so I basically have dry suit until I switch over to my Vacobi gear, which is more cold weather gear than cold water gear.
Yeah.
And that's usually like, yeah, same thing, kind of April timeframe that I'll start doing that. Okay, so Vacobi is very good gear, but yeah, it's not cold water gear. Just some people kind of think it is, but it's not. Okay. All right. Do we want to move on to talk a bit about booties and gloves? Okay.
Yes, definitely.
All right. So let's start with gloves first. For me, don't wear pogies or mittens like Matt might. It's just strictly gloves, and it's just a matter of getting a good pair of gloves, a good thickness, and ones that have a good kind of stickiness to hold on to your paddle, because you are switching so much with the SUP or the outrigger. Ones I use are Excel Infinities. This is a 3 mil glove. It's a really good glove. It keeps you really, really warm. The one thing I've noticed with these is that when you first put them on, they seem really tight, and I almost get like a numbness in my hands for the first like 5-10 minutes when I'm paddling. And I've noticed that once my core temperature warms up, I don't know if it's because like my body temperature has gone up and the neoprene is warmed up and loosened a bit, but I find they're more comfortable after about 5 minutes. My hands, generally, if I'm wearing these, they can be in the water like almost the whole time, and my hands will not get cold. Matt, do you want to kind of talk about your pogies and stuff as well?
Yeah, I should say, like, so I sometimes use a phrase that I get from talking to ice climbers, instead of talking about gloves, talking about glove systems, because you may have like multiple layers that you use to protect your hands, and use different things for different conditions. These are my what are these 7 mil mitts that I use surfing. Like Jeff says, if there's any kind of a fold here, it's like the gasket on your neck. If there's any kind of fold in it, it's going to suck, like because suddenly the pressure's doubled or tripled over in that point. It's really crappy. These are kind of difficult to paddle in. And you can get neoprene mitts that have a curl built into the glove that are pretty cool. I have seen Dragon used to paddle with a SUP glove, and maybe Nancy, you've seen these. That is basically this glove, but with the palm taken out, so you can actually still grip your paddle. It's the drag about a thick glove is that the increased width of the paddle makes your means you're using a ton more grip, like forearm strength, to just hold your paddle, and you can tire very easily there. So some kind of cutout system like that can make sense. Sometimes I just wear these. This is a kind of cheap neoprene glove from Mac. They're kind of mediocre. And in whitewater, I will usually I have these like thin gloves that are kind of my ice climbing lead gloves that I don't know where you'd get something exactly like this, because I got these in the Himalaya actually, but it's like just a thin kind of cheap glove with a little bit of grip on it. And I wear that inside a pogie. And I don't know if you guys all know what pogies are. They're sometimes they're made out of Gore-Tex and sometimes made out of like neoprene, like these are. It's attached to the paddle, not to your hand. So it's like a glove that lives on your paddle, and you can wear them without gloves. I generally try to wear something, because when I have gone in the water and lost my paddle in whitewater in the winter with pogies, I come out of the water, I surface, I make it to shore, and then I can't hold my paddle. Whereas this gives me like a couple of minutes, like 3 to 5 minutes before I start to lose hand function. And that's a really significant window for us, because that's, within that window, you're likely to be back in your boat in position to continue paddling and then warm back up again. So, but if your hand freezes before then you can't really paddle, and it's not a good situation.
Any questions about gloves? Mike, Sim, you had posted a link to gloves that you use.
Yeah, it's the Glacier Outdoor Premium Water Glove, waterproof glove. It's pre-curved. Can you talk to that, Michael?
Yeah, it was just something I picked up on Amazon because I was chicken and I wanted something cheap. It's actually gone up in price significantly, but it keeps my hands pretty warm. It's pretty dry. But it takes a little bit of getting used to, because you've got that extra thickness. So when you're switching sides, you get stuck a little because you just have to get used to, you don't have that feel that you normally have, but you adapt very quickly. And like I said, I do not recover quickly from a huli. So I need every advantage I can get, and the thicker the gloves, the better, right? That's basically it. Like I said, I'm sure Matt carries something similar.
Have you hulied in cold water?
I deliberately flipped it.
Right.
I just went in the water and see how quickly I can get out. I was not quick, right? Because typically, and it's worse because Matt talked about it earlier, if you if you inhale a bunch of cold water, it's like, take the extreme of walking into a cold shower, 100-fold, and you're literally, you just need to catch your breath, right? That's the first thing I was taught when you huli.
Yeah.
Catch your breath, right? If you need to hang out a little bit, you do that. But in cold water, it's a different matter, right? So
it takes you longer to catch your breath because you keep
yeah. And if I do fly my arm up, the water is only like 3 feet deep.
Yeah.
Just for the record, so I do post some pics, right? The water is not deep. If I go over, I can stand up. So it's
anywhere behind the break wall is pretty shallow.
Yeah.
And you can get to shore very quickly if you needed to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically.
Like when you do go in, that's one thing though, is like, don't panic. Like take that time, like that second or two to calm yourself down before, like if you need to, because the more you panic, the worse off you are.
General, there's another like little wilderness safety thing is slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So sometimes, I know this from huliing, like in the race that one time when I hulied 5 times in a row, you do need to set up for a second if you can, but like Mike was saying, it's not easy to take that moment in the cold.
Oh, there's a balance. Like on the one hand, you want to get it up as quickly as possible, like just boom, boom, and like as soon as you can, the least amount of time in the water as possible, not just because you're racing, but also you just want to get out of the water, back onto the boat. So on the one hand, you want to move quickly and get up. On the other hand, you're right, like you want to kind of balance it out. One time, like, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, I was in some big waves and hulied, and I got the boat back over, and then I got up, but then the boat went over again, and I ended up huliing like 4 times, like sort of back to back in the same huli. And man, after a while, you're tired, you're fighting the waves, you're fighting the boat. And on the 4th one, I was like, okay, let me just take a second here and think about this. Relax. Okay, get back up and
But like Michael's saying, that weight is really tough when you're in the cold, because you are losing capacity. You may be staying dry, maybe your body's dry, but you're bleeding heat out into the water. The water is an infinite reservoir of cold.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard.
Nancy had a quick question about she's got a small hole in her wetsuit. Should she get that repaired, or can she use it
in your wetsuit?
Yeah,
you can do it yourself, Nancy. You can swing by and borrow the Aquaseal from me, or whatever. I have in my 3.2, I have a hole in the belly, and when I walk into the waves at A Bay at Ashford's Bay, I notice it. Like I would just put a glob of something in it or whatever.
But I think a wetsuit is more forgiving than a dry suit with holes, right? Like a dry suit, you can't have a hole in it, but a wetsuit, like you can, it's just more comfortable if you don't.
Well, my dry suit, I call my dry suit my damp suit. It leaks.
Yeah.
It keeps me alive though. So I think of it like you buy a brand new dry suit, it does a lot. It's an amazing tool. If you're not sweating hard, you're bone dry when you come out.
Yeah.
But that's the comfort function, right? And then there's this other function, which is the survival function. And even a kind of, like mine has a bunch of pinhole pricks in it. I try to repair them myself, but I only do so well. It's still going to keep me alive, right? Like the difference, the 0.5% or something of difference in thermal protection is not super significant in the timescales that we're thinking about.
I'd also recommend not buying a dry suit from AliExpress. You laugh, but I've had people send me links and ask me about it, and it's, do you want to drive a car that has no seatbelts and no airbag, and the wheel might fall off? I'm sure it drives fine, right? But you can't compromise.
You really want to try it out. You really want to try it out because if it doesn't feel right, it's a bummer.
And it's still a hefty investment, even if it's, comparatively, I guess.
$100.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a big investment, but it's cheaper than a funeral.
Dry suits can be partially repaired as well. You can have the gaskets replaced. They can be resprayed to coat them a little bit to help with the waterproofing as well. So that it can be done. Like once you have it, as long as you take care of it, it can last you a fairly long time.
People have them for 20 years.
Yeah.
Nice.
Not AliExpress.
Replacing your gaskets is really easy. You can do it yourself. I've replaced all mine. Khalid was asking, do neoprene gloves insulate better when wet? And I will say, probably in principle, but if your neoprene gloves are soaking wet, they are not living in the water, right? They're exposed to the air all the time. So that wet, that water will carry, the evaporative process will carry heat away very rapidly. So
yeah. So like
wet glove is colder.
Yeah, so like they'll be warm for a little bit, but then yeah, you're right. Like they will get cold pretty quickly because they just aren't going in the water quite as much.
Thanks, that's really helpful. The reason I asked the question is I've got this pair of 3mm gloves, and I find that my hands get really cold. But then I've tried on thicker gloves, and I just find them really restrictive. So I just don't really know like how do I get that right balance where my hands stay warm but they're still somewhat usable.
Yeah, that's the tough part. Like with the ones I have now, like they're 3mm, and even when I tried those on, like I couldn't figure out what was going on, and it's like, okay, why are my hands still so cold? And then, but like once they warmed up, it's like, okay, maybe it's not that my hands are cold. Maybe the gloves are just tight that they're numbing my fingers for a little bit, and then once they warm up, they're a little bit better. So I don't know, like try like warming up the gloves before you put them on. And just try different things. I find it's a lot of trial and error. What kind of paddling do you do, Khalid?
So mostly down at Woodbine Beach. I've got a dry suit, so it's like kind of an hour and a half long paddles in the winter, staying fairly close
What
to
kind of
shore.
boat are you paddling?
Are you doing SUP or?
Yeah, an inflatable SUP. Yeah.
Okay. So what you can do with SUP, it's a little easier, is you can actually go with gloves. They do have SUP gloves, and those would probably keep your fingers a little bit warmer. There's SUP Skin is one of the better companies, and they make a great dry suit, and they make a great set of SUP paddling gloves.
So, but as Jeff was indicating, fit makes a huge difference, in that you'll notice that just with your regular gloves in the winter, like if you're skiing or something, that if the fit is a little restrictive, it will often inhibit blood flow, and then you'll cool right off. So it could be you just have a little bit of bad luck with the gloves that you bought. It might not really just be the thickness. And I have like lucked into nicer neoprene gloves, which I either usually lose or wear out or something. And I've noticed that they because they fit better, I am warmer.
Yeah, it definitely is. It takes, with gloves especially, and boots not as much, but with gloves, it takes a lot of trial and error to find the ones that seem to work best for you. It's taken me like a number of years to find ones that I'm comfortable with, and even then, right at the beginning, I'm not that comfortable with them. There's a lot of them out there where it all depends on how cold it is, and you just have to kind of try a few to see what works.
Kayakers have a distinct advantage here. On the one hand, our hands are always wet, so because our hands are so low. But on the other hand, we don't switch sides, and so we can use pogies. And pogies are really dramatically superior in terms of reducing heat loss to any glove that I've ever worn. But you guys can't wear them, so you have to figure out some kind of glove solution. And
Need
I
some
think those.
outrigger canoe pogies.
Was that?
Oh, outrigger canoe pogies.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. One can imagine something that wouldn't suck too bad, but I think that those palmless mitts could be really, really excellent, but I've only ever seen Dragon use them. I've never seen anybody else wear them. I was going to say, I have that same problem of fit and restriction with my booties. So these are my my 8mm surfing booties. In the when I'm surfing, I just have these, and on my bare skin, it's fine. But in my surf ski with my dry suit on, the like crinkled up dry suit underneath leads to little pressure points, and also my feet are wet, but mostly out of the water, mostly exposed to the air. My feet are always cold in surf ski, and it doesn't. I can't. I don't have a solution that I'm happy with.
Okay, so boots. I'll kind of show what I use. These are so light. This is a 8mm thickness as well. So I just got these this year. Before that, I was wearing kind of the mech basic neoprene. I think they're, what are they, 4 or 5 mil, something like that. Not the greatest, but I find with the Solite, with the 8mm, like these things are awesome. Like my feet, like by the end of my paddle, like no matter what, your toes are gonna get cold. But these, like I walk around in the cold water and don't feel a thing for a while.
And Jeff, you're wearing those with your booty dry suit or the non-booty dry suit, right?
So both. So the other dry suit I showed was my wife's, and she has the one with the booties, and she'll wear her pair of these inside. What I do, I have 2 options. I have a pair of neoprene socks that go with this that I wear, and then if I don't have those available, then I just wear merino wool socks underneath, or like a neoprene sock. What I will also do as an extra layer of protection is I take grocery bags. So I put the socks on and then put grocery bags around my feet and then stick them in the booties. And it keeps the water at bay from your toes and keeps your feet a little bit warmer for a little bit longer. It looks terrible, and like it's really MacGyvered, but it's something that I found over trial and error that does keep your feet a little bit warmer for a little bit longer.
And then you can get groceries on the way home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They smell really good.
Groceries in these bags, actually.
Do we have any other gear to talk about? I mean, we can talk PFDs, but I was going to also say that we've got probably a few other people that are doing some cold water paddling on the line here that maybe want to jump in as well. Share some thoughts. I know Foruzan's here and Mike Sim jumped in already, but maybe we'll talk PFDs and then come around to that.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. So
Go.
PFDs. Never, ever, ever inflatable in cold water. Ever, ever, ever. Full PFDs. So just standard PFD. Make sure you're comfortable in it. You can paddle, same as always. With me, always have a whistle attached to my PFD somewhere easily accessible, so that if I do get into trouble, the whistle's right there and it's easily used. It's not sitting in a dry bag attached to my boat or my board. You want to have it so like I get into trouble in the water, it's right here and it's like right on my shoulder and I can use it quick. So this is a Kokatat, great PFD. And then you've also got the Bicobi, which makes a really good PFD. It's not Canadian Coast Guard approved. Say that now. It's US Coast Guard approved, but not Canadian Coast Guard approved. But it's, for our paddling, it's more than acceptable. And this one, nice and bright so that people can see that you're out on the water, just for that visibility factor as well in the cold. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Matt, you're on mute.
I wear my my whatever, how you pronounce the name, the Maka PFD, my racing PFD in the winter, mostly because I don't like to wear it out. So I use my whitewater PFD. This is a rescue PFD. I like a couple of things about it. It has a slightly smaller profile than a regular, like standard PFD that you buy at at Mech or something. So it's a little more comfortable to paddle in. It's not as nice as the racing PFDs, but it's a little nicer. I like to have a big pocket. I have this, it has this rescue line on it, so you can tow another boat if you need to. Like Jeff, I keep my whistle right close, and I don't know, you know, because I wear the same one for whitewater, it feels comfortable to have a knife. I mostly use my knife to cut apples, but it just feels.
Can you hold the jacket a bit higher on camera?
Oh yeah, okay. Is that on camera? Yeah.
And what was that tow rope you said you have? Is that on the back?
So you have like the regular straps, and then you'll notice there's one more wide strap here. This is the attachment here.
Hold it up a bit. Hold it up a bit.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
So this is the attachment in front. It comes in here. Mine's kind of old. It's gotten a little bit finicky. You thread it in here and close it. Sorry, I can't do it with my bad hand. And then you can clip a beaner here and a tow rope.
Oh yeah.
And the thing about this, it has a quick release on it. So you're tied to the other boat, but if something goes wrong, you can drop them and let them go over the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Cool.
Any questions on PFDs?
Matt, what was the brand name of that one?
That's Astral, Astral, and I forget the model, but it's their main rescue PFD. They're expensive.
Maybe afterwards we can create kind of a list of the stuff that you guys showed here. You can send that out.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll mention is leashes. When you're doing cold water paddling, I tend to I don't venture out into the lake. I stay close to shore, but even then, I'll have the leash so that if something does go wrong, at least I'm still close to the boat and I don't have to worry about swimming anywhere to get to the boat. It's right there and get back on the boat or the board. And this one is a Puakea. It's a quick release in case I get tangled up in the boat and on the wrong side. It's got a quick carabiner that comes off, and then I can snap back in once I get back into the boat. So that it allows me, if I hoolie, unsnap, jump back in, and then snap back in just in case.
So I was going to put together an order of those leashes, because I like the idea of the quick release, because mine doesn't have quick release, and I've gotten wrapped up sometimes, and I want a quick release. But then somebody said, oh, the quick releases aren't very good because they actually, if you twist it the right way, it can fall off.
So I haven't noticed that yet, but I only just got it probably a month ago, maybe.
Okay.
So I haven't had that much trial and error with it to try out and see.
Yeah.
My Epic has a quick release on it, and I've never had that problem. I will also, however, say that it's really hard to work in the water, and it's a little stiff.
Yeah.
I doubt in the winter that it would make a ton of difference, but that also, yours looks a little better than mine. Mine's quite stiff.
Yeah, it with gloves on, it I haven't tested it out yet because I haven't wanted to flip and try it. But yeah, with gloves on, it's not going to be easy, but at least it gives you that option, especially with the warmer weather. Then I would use it more in the warm weather.
Yeah. My general rule is don't paddle without a leash, ever.
Yeah.
Probably more important than the life jacket.
Yeah, I mean, you got a built-in PFD when you have your boat, right?
Yeah. Unless it's leaking.
Well, how fast can it leak? Well, I guess it could leak fast.
Might get run over by a jet ski. I don't know.
Hey, Foruzan, can you hear me? Can you jump in? Maybe she's
yeah, no, I'm here.
Hey.
Hi.
So you're relatively new to cold water paddling.
My first year. Yeah.
So what were the steps that you took to get dressed properly, and how's your experience been so far?
So in the spring, I bought a dry suit. I already had neoprene and a wetsuit. I wore my wetsuit probably until the end-ish of October, and end of October I moved to the dry suit. And even when there was a couple of days where it was hot, like air temperature hot, but I still kept in my dry suit because the lake was really cold. And I do not like cold water, so I don't want to be in cold water. So yeah, I mean, a big part of it is over this summer, I made sure that I was really comfortable jumping off of my boat, getting into my boat, and not sort of being in a position where I would feel nervous. And I think that's a huge part about cold water paddling, is to really have that comfort and, again, staying really calm. And I think Jeff and Matt really cover that quite well. It really is important for you to have that confidence and to stay calm no matter what sort of situation you're in. When I go out paddling, from like 3 days before, I'll be checking the conditions, and then like the buddies that I go out with will chat about, where are we launching? So if it's going to be a really windy day and we're looking at 3-foot waves, do we want to launch from the Humber instead, or are we okay going from somewhere else? So making plans and having a number of options as to where you can go depending on the conditions, I think that's really important. And again, it's all like what you said, risk mitigation, and being prepared, having that whistle, having your full life jacket, making sure I only have merino wool. So like my long sleeve underneath my dry suit is merino wool. I have so it's all base layer merino wool, along with really thick merino wool socks. All of this stuff is available, it's not hard to access. You can go to Smart Wool, you can go Icebreaker. They're all great brands. Yeah. And if you ever feel like I didn't get enough sleep or I'm really tired today, don't paddle. Like, it's in the summertime, it's okay if you go in, but in the wintertime, you're like, it's dangerous. And so you need to have that extra focus, and whoever you're with, you need to make sure that you're all looking out for each other. That's the other thing, is no matter how far ahead or behind anyone is, you make sure that you always have a sight line to them, and that within a couple minutes you can get to that person. You're not going to jump in and rescue them, but it's important for you to be around one another.
Yeah, and to kind of talk them through if they go in the water, at least to be there to give them instruction, talk them down if they panic as well.
I think even having the proximity, just even if you yourself know you can do it, it's nice to know that someone's there. Or if something goes wrong, that person's got a cell phone and they can call. You know what I mean? Like, it's that added comfort for you.
Yeah, the phone's a good point. I really believe in always having a phone with you all the time.
Yeah.
Have you gone in the water yet, Foruzan?
Yep.
By a hoolie or something else?
Through hoolie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was I know all of this stuff, but once you're in and you feel that cold water, and my mistake was I was thinking about the summer, and I'll just go under the boat to go to the other side. But you don't want to go under the boat because it's freezing cold water, right? You actually want to go around your boat. But that was like second nature, is to go under the boat, and all of a sudden you're drinking cold water and you get into that whole trying to catch your breath, trying to flip over your boat, trying to get on your boat. And like I said, for me, it was in my head, I'm like, I know how to do this because I've done this a whole bunch of times over the summer. So I'm okay. As much as I'm like trying to catch my breath, it was all of that was still fine, because I knew in my mind, I know what I need to do. Here are all my steps.
I mean, I wanted to kind of, when Mike mentioned like just practicing hooliging, I did remind me of a couple things I had wanted to say. First is, in other like paddling disciplines, I know people who practice safety drills very extensively. Like I know whitewater kayakers who will do rescue practice every day all year long. So like when they go out for a paddle, they always end with a bunch of rescue practices. And like I aspired to that for a bunch of years when I was doing surf ski. I found that the bike home in my soaking wet dry suit was no fun. And so I kind of don't do it. And I don't know a lot of people who do. It's a great thing to do, but it's not really our culture. And I wanted to say, you look around at people on the water, different disciplines have really different cultures and standards. And it would be good if we could do two things. On the one hand, not necessarily be super judgy about other people. So like the rowers go by in March in short sleeves and maybe even like a tank top and shorts or something like that. That seems messed up to me, right? But they've been rowing for 20 years or 30 years, and it's worked fine for them. So recognize that they have their own expertise about and their own like things about their risk tolerance. That's one thing. On the other hand, you're a group of people paddling together. You should be entirely comfortable with what everybody else is doing. So whereas you don't judge these strangers, on the other hand, you don't go out in a group where you don't feel like everybody's prepared to your like standard.
Jeff had to take off because his cat made a big mess. So I think we've covered what we need to cover, and thanks Jeff for coming. But does anybody have any final questions? And like maybe we'll have another 5 or so minutes if anybody has questions. Nancy?
You're muted, Nancy.
Okay. One little tip, I think actually what you guys have covered is really great. For some of it for me is just a reminder, but that's always a good thing because you've got a whole summer where you've been paddling and now you're in the winter. It's like, oh yeah, what did I do last year again? And all these little things you can easily forget. So it's been really helpful. One little tip I found with the Booties, with my wetsuit, I wear obviously a tighter fitting bootie, but with my dry suit, I was advised to go one size larger, and it accommodates the sock. It also accommodates the extra fabric, but it also lets you wiggle your toes to help keep them warm.
Yeah, that's great.
And that was all I had to say.
Thanks, Nancy.
I'm curious for some thoughts around, I guess I'm more interested in the shoulder season paddling, not as much like pure winter. So let's say, April, May, when the water's still cold and the air temperature could be, 15 degrees and quite hot. Obviously you dress with the water, but how do you balance, like, do you have any tips on balancing what you wear so you're not sweating and just pretty much hyperventilating from being so hot?
Yeah, for me, like it's hard. If I've made the call to wear a dry suit, then, I'll try to assess. It's sometimes a little hard to know before you go out, right, what you're going to feel like. So I'll try to like wear minimum layers underneath. And then I try to have like, I try to wear a PFD with a pouch in the front so I can take my hat on and off to regulate that way. I make sure I drink water because I'm going to sweat a lot. And so like it can be kind of uncomfortable, but the real thing about sweating is like you can actually start to dehydrate and then you're screwed. And then I with my new paddle, it's going to be harder, but I can kind of move my pogies into the center of the paddle and take my hands out, and then I can just use my my head. I have a lot of surface area on my head, and my hands as kind of as just heat exhaust, right? And that's okay. I sometimes find when I do something like that, like I do a hard brace and my hand gets soaked, and 2 seconds later my hands are freezing and I'm wondering how I'm going to get them back in the pogies and stuff. So it's not foolproof.
Yeah, I should have added, Matt, that I've never paddled in dry suit. I got a 3-2 wetsuit that I've used in early spring. But some days you're just boiling hot, and I find that when it's like below 10 degrees and raining outside were probably the best days because you're like keeping cool, bit of wind. But other days you're dying and you're like going in the water just to cool down.
Darius, if you could find a decent quality Farmer John, then in the shoulder season, that's going to do a lot of protection from the cold shock problem. And if you're not doing really long paddles, you don't have to worry too much about hypothermia. And then you can use polypro or whatever kind of regular wicking layers, like thick wicking layers if you want.
That's what I do. I use a Farmer John in the spring, and then a dry suit top on the top. But not, I actually bought one of those level 6 with the gasket, the rubber gasket, but it was just too tight. So now I have a zipper and a Velcro strap, but it's a dry suit top with a Farmer John underneath.
Chris, you can cut down the gasket to reduce the this is the splash top. These are this is a Patagonia splash top from 1988. You can see it's as stylish as it ever was.
The last question, sorry, I'm kind of taking a lot of time, but Jeff made a comment about the Vacobi gear not being cold water, which totally get, but I just wonder, I don't have that gear, but I was kind of curious if that's like the next step towards the water's warmer, but it's still cold, but it's still not board shorts kind of thing. Like, is it good? Like, is it effective? Is it
fantastic?
Somewhat breathable?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's fantastic. Although I find that the season is shorter than you think for like Kobe. Like it's especially in surf ski for the pants, because you're a surf skier, right, Taras?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody may not know that, because our lower halves are really wet most of the time, especially if there's anything fun to do. The waves come right up over your hips, and it's a little bit different for OC or for SUP, where it's just a small part of your body that's getting wet in an ordinary course of paddling.
I mean, the best option is to have a bunch of different gear, and then you can choose on the day, right? Even bring it with you down to the club if you're driving. Bring a bag full of gear, and then you can touch the water and decide on the spot, especially in the shoulder seasons.
Chris, I kept my whole passenger seat of my car was gear. Like,
yeah,
I had everything in there, and it was just for that, because when you hit September, you don't know what it is that you want to wear.
Yeah,
so it's good to have all those options for you.
Yeah. Agreed. It's 8:29. Any final question?
Are you going to post this somewhere where we can rewatch it?
Yeah, we did the recording, and I'll post it afterwards. Yeah,
awesome.
And like I said, we'll sort of gather a list of the gear that we talked about. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks everyone for coming.